Hello and welcome to day 3. And today we're going to be looking at muscles and movement, which are very key to the whole experience of being in the gym. Because if you don't know the muscles that you're working and you don't know how they move, you're not going to be able to effectively target them. So we're going to start with the upper body and go through some main muscles in the upper body. We're going to look at the lower body. We're going to move on to the core, and we're going to look at some key movements that you'll be doing. We'll talk about safety and good form, injury and prevention. So this is a fairly long video, but hopefully you can revisit it and it will be really fundamental to your understanding. So please don't expect that it's all going to go in. Come back to it again. We'll reiterate a lot of the points when we're doing exercises. We'll talk about the muscles that they're working. So you will start to build an understanding if you don't have it already. So for me, muscles are nice to have because they look good when they start to grow and they get bigger. And people notice it because it takes a lot of work to build muscle. Most people don't have genetically big muscles. So having muscles that are fairly big means that you've done something and it's consistent. So people respect that. They look at that and they go, yeah, I understand that. But fundamentally for me, having good, strong, flexible muscles is more important because it enables us to age gracefully. It enables us, instead of doing a kind of quick decline as we get past 30, we can actually keep our level of performance up for a long period of time. And you see that people who regularly weight train and who use the gym are not the people who are walking around with walking sticks and injuries as they get to kind of old age, because their muscles are able to cope with the further demands that their body puts on them as it gets older. So that for me is the key. It's not just about looking good, that's a side effect. It's about the functionality of your body and how you can maintain it as much as possible as you get older. Okay, so we're going to go through the upper body now, starting with the chest. So the pectoralis or pecs, there's 2 muscles here. You don't really need to know that, but these are the muscles that enable you to push away from your body and also bring the arms across the chest. So really very, very useful muscles. We target them by bench pressing, by doing push-ups and chest flies. So they look great when they're big, but they take a lot of hard work to get there. Then we're going to look at the back. So there's a few muscles in the back that we need to understand. The trapezius, which is the trapezium-shaped muscle at the back. So it goes up your neck, along to your shoulder blade and then down. This is good for moving, rotating and stabilizing the shoulder blade. So things that we're going to use, exercises that we're going to use to target this are shrugs, a face pull, where we bring either a cable machine or similar towards our face, deadlift, which you'll become familiar with, and upright rows, where you stand up, you have a bar and you bring it up towards your chest. Okay, then the biggest muscles in your back, the lats, these are really used for pulling objects towards you and also for pulling your body towards your hand. So if you're doing a pull-up or pulling something down, that is your lats working. So pull-ups, we use rows and lat pull-down machine, which again you'll become familiar with. And then finally on the back, we're going to look at the rhomboids. Now the rhomboids are little muscles that connect your spine and your shoulder blade. And they're very, very important for posture. They're quite small, but they can be targeted fairly easily. So seated cable rows, face pulls again, rear delt flies, which we're going to use, and a prone, lying down, face down, arms up, and you raise your arms. So a Y lift. It might sound complicated, but these are very important muscles to get strong, just because how much they have to do with pulling your shoulders back. So in your shoulders, there are three muscles called the deltoids. They are used for lifting your arms, front, side, maybe to the back, and also rotating your shoulders around. So we use a shoulder press to push them, lateral raises, which go out in the front, at the side, and then front raises that go out in front of you. There are also loads of little muscles, which we're not going to cover, but which are very important, and which some of these movements and exercises will also target and strengthen. And often you find that people with shoulder injuries, it's not the deltoids that become the problem, it's the smaller muscles underneath. So we make sure that we target these as well with the exercises we're doing to keep the whole shoulder strengthened and able to move effectively. Everyone knows these. Biceps. Yeah. Biceps mean two heads, which means there's two parts of the muscle. There's the long and the short head. So these are useful for bending the elbow and rotating the arm. Bicep curls, chin-ups, barbell and dumbbell curls. We use, there's a lot of things you find with a lot of compound moves that your arms will get worked just as part of being, grabbing the weight and being part of the movement. So we work them a fair amount, but we do target them specifically in isolation as well, because they look good when they grow. So on the back of the arm, we have the tricep. That's three parts of the muscles, those three-headed, and that's used for straightening. It's the antagonist of the bicep. So when the bicep contracts, the tricep extends. When the tricep contracts, the bicep extends. Like that. There you go. So we use skull crushers, which sound hideous but are quite fun. Bench dips, which is a good body weight exercise, and overhead tricep extensions, usually with a cable machine, sometimes from the back, sometimes down over your head. So again, you'll become familiar with these moves. So next we go lower, and we're talking about the thighs, and at the front of the thighs are the quadriceps, 4 muscles. You'll find that they're themes with muscles. It's either shapes, number of muscles, if they look like something else, or their position or orientation. So the quadriceps can be really, really big and impressive, and they're used for extending the knee and are really vital when we're walking, running and squatting. You'll find that if your quads aren't strong enough, you'll struggle to do certain lifts of your leg, and also it can impact on people having dodgy knees if the muscles linked to the knees, quadriceps, and the other ones are not strong, because that they help to support the knee and can cope with uneven movement and things. So with the quadriceps, we target them with squats, leg presses and lunges, and no one likes any of these, but trust me, they're really beneficial. Okay, on the back of the leg is the hamstrings. This is again a collection of muscles. You'll find that these are generally quite tight in people, and people will struggle with working them effectively in the gym. There's not as many moves and it's not as easy to target, but they are really, really helpful again with helping to bend the knee and to extend the hip. So they're an integral part of the leg, obviously, and they help when you're running, walking. If you suddenly need to stop and turn, the hamstrings are what kind of kicks in. They're like a brake. So there are some moves that target them specifically. Deadlifts, leg curls, which is on a machine, good mornings, which sounds wonderful, but isn't always as wonderful as you might expect, and Romanian deadlifts, which is one of my favourites. These are ones where there's often a hinge involved, so you'll hinge forward some way. But we'll cover that as you get into your training. So onto the buttocks, the bum, the gluteus maximus, minimus, and medius, I think it is. 3 muscles together. They are some of the strongest in the body, and you really notice when people have these developed. So they're quite key to our functioning as upright beings, walking around on 2 legs. The reason why we can is because of the buttocks. So they're essential for movement of the hip and the thigh. They support the back as well. If you have lower back problems, it's often to do with the glutes and stabilizing the pelvis. So we target these with bridges, hip thrusts, and step ups. Some body weight, some will add weight to. So look out for those. Okay, moving on to the calves. So there's 2 muscles in the calves. The gastrocnemius, which is named after the stomach, because apparently it looks like a stomach to the person who named it. And the soleus, which is underneath the gastrocnemius. So you'll find that if you're bouncing, jumping, running, these are really key for all of those movements. So we target them with calf raises, box jumps, and seated calf raises, where you have a weight on your leg and you lift your knees up. So yeah, again, people often struggle with these muscles because they can be quite underdeveloped and they don't always respond well to training. So we might need to play with these to kind of overload them a little bit more in order to get some growth. Moving on to the core. The core is, some people overlook it, some people focus too much on it. The core is a complex system of muscles that are all laid on top of each other in different ways, and it enables us to move in all the weird and wonderful ways and bend down and twist and all of that. That all comes from your core. You find that most exercises that you do in the gym, especially compound moves, have a lot of core involvement. So it's really important that we focus on them, not so much to make them pop out and give you a 6-pack, but just because if those muscles are weak, you are likely to cause an injury to yourself. You're likely to use other muscles in a way that you shouldn't be to try and support your body. So making sure that your core is strong gives you strength in all other areas. All right, so we're going to start with the rectus abdominis, the abs, the visible, well, this is the bit that seems visible, those nice square bits. They're actually under the external obliques. They're used for flexing the lumbar spine. So if you bend forward or you crunch, so if you bring your legs towards your chest, that is using your abs. So sit-ups, I will never program sit-ups, they're just pointless. But people often use sit-ups to target them. Crunches and leg raises are really good for working your rectus abdominis. Then we've got the transverse abdominis. That is much deeper in the core. It's actually, I think, the muscles that are kind of internal before the organs, and you might be able to see from this picture, it looks like a corset, so it kind of wraps around the inner part of the body, and it gives strength and stability and protection to the spine. So we use, when we go on a forearm plank, so you're lying down on your forearms, or stomach vacuums, where you're sucking in as much as possible, that is where we are working our transverse abdominis. So we've got 2 sets of obliques. The obliques are called that because they run at an oblique angle to most of the other muscles in the body, so they kind of run diagonal on either side of your body. So, and that enables you to do, again, a kind of twist that goes down either side. So rotation and twisting, stabilization of the body. There's the upper one, which is on top, and then the lower, or the inner, external on top, inner, internal, underneath. You'll often find these around your hips, and sometimes they can stick out quite nicely. giving that kind of chiseled look where you've got your hips and then a little bump that comes out. That's your obliques popping. So Russian twists, which you'll find in your workouts, and side planks. So both of those you will get familiar with. So we're just going to look at some other muscles in the back now. The erector spinae and the multifidus. And these are muscles that run along the spine. They help to make sure that we are standing upright, so our posture is correct, and they also support the spine with little movements, bends, especially during lifts. So we do back extensions. These can sometimes be standing, or you might find that there's a machine to do this, or deadlifts. Deadlifts are wonderful compound moves that target loads and loads of muscles, but we use them to target these muscles. Okay, so I'm going to not read everything on the screen here, but I'm just going to focus on the key points. So 5 key movements: push, where you push away from your body; pull, where you're pulling towards your body; lift, where you're lifting something from the ground up towards your body; lower, where you're taking a weight from your center of your body and lowering it down, or where you are lowering your body down. So if you're hanging, so say you're doing a pull up or a chin up and you're at the top and you drop down, that is a lower. And a rotate. Now, sometimes these are used in combination. A lunge might be a lift, so you would lift your leg up, you then push forward, so you're pushing your body forward, and then you're lowering. So some of these exercises combine all of these movements, or various numbers of these movements together. Examples for each of them: so bench press, overhead press, both pushing, pulling, rows, so anything where you're pulling towards your body; a pull up and a chin up, did that the wrong way around; lifts, so deadlifts, and squats. This might seem strange because you think, actually, I'm doing with a squat, I'm going down first before I go up, but the hard bit is the push up. So when you're down at the bottom, you've then got to get that weight back up to where you started. So that is the lift part. Lower, Romanian deadlifts and leg presses. Really good movements, both of those. Rotate, Russian twists, medicine ball throws, anything where you're kind of swinging a weight and moving it to the side are good for these. We try and program weekly to make sure that we cover all of these movements. It's not always possible, but generally most workout plans that are good will cover each of these movements independently to make sure that we're developing our body in a coherent way, because we don't want some of the muscles to develop and more than other ones, because this gives us imbalances in our body and that can cause problems later on. Hopefully you've had enough time to read this slide. If not, pause the video, have a look. Okay, so I'm going to keep banging on about warming up properly and cooling down. Dynamic stretches at the beginning, static stretches at the end. This is really key for safety because you have to get your body in the mood to exercise. You have to tell it that something's happening so that it expects that something's going to happen and it is prepared for it. Now, using appropriate weights, I think especially as a beginner, this is really difficult. It gets probably harder as well when you get a bit more used to the gym because your ego kicks in. At least when you start, you don't know what you can and can't lift. I would always err on the side of caution and go light. Pick a weight that looks like you can manage it. Try it. If you need to go heavier, complete the set, then go up. You can always add more. There's nothing wrong with doing lighter weights at the start to get the form right. If you focus specifically on how to do the movement and you start thinking about what muscles are actually contracting and what is going on with a light weight, you will be in a much better position when you start using a heavier weight. And this is key because so many people don't know how to do exercises properly. And if you ever spend any time in the gym and you watch people, you will see some of the craziest stuff going on where people don't understand what they're doing. And I'm sure everyone's, culpable that we go in and we do an exercise wrong. And that's not to say that, there's a right way, always 100% of doing everything, but there's definitely a good form way that's not going to get you injured. So take your time picking the weight, take your time increasing the weight. Generally, for larger weights, if you're adding somewhere between 1 to 2 kilograms a week, when you're really in your stride, you're probably at the height of what you can push each week. If you're doing smaller isolation moves, 0.5 kilogram, maybe 1 kilogram, that's, you just slowly increment. You'll find with dumbbells that they are already set. Most of them go up in 2 kilograms. And that makes it difficult because actually the jump from 12 kilograms to 14 is quite a large increase as a percentage. So you will find that instead of increasing weights, you're going to have to increase reps. So you get your body used to lifting that weight and you increase how often it can lift, and then you'll find that you can skip up to the next one at a lower rep range. The app that you've got access to has, I have chosen, for each exercise, I've chosen a video, and I've chosen that video on the merit that it is simple to quickly look at and understand the move. It doesn't have loads of talking, you can just quickly check. But for each exercise where I've chosen the video, I have also made sure that there's a step-by-step instruction. So please, before you do the exercise, have a look at the app, read through the instructions, watch the video, and really understand that so that you go and do the move right. If you're aware of that movement already, great. Maybe just check over the video because it might be that you're doing it or you have been taught to do it wrong. Just check that it's absolutely, the right way. General rules of thumb: back straight, core tight, keep your core engaged. If you're doing any kind of hinge movement or you're lifting like a deadlift, you need to make sure that your back is engaged and as straight as possible. We don't always, there are movements where we move our back and it's not straight, but generally that's what you need to think about. Next 2 points: look in the mirror. Look in the mirror from different angles, and you see people doing that. It's not always posing. Sometimes it's because they need to understand what is actually happening as they're moving. Now, for arms and your upper, it might not be so relevant, but definitely for lower body things, if you're ever doing split squats, for instance, or lunges, it's good to actually see how far your knees come down. Are you getting into a 90 degree bend on both legs? Things like that. If that's not easy to see, film yourself. There's nothing wrong with just putting the camera down low, just generally filming yourself. Try not to catch other people in it, and don't get stressed if anyone walks in front of it, but just then watch it back and think, okay, yeah, that looks all right. Or actually, I realised that I was doing this, or I was shaking at this point, or I was a bit wobbly, and then think about how you can adapt that. And if you want, send that video to me and we'll have a look. Injuries. Now, if you're doing the form correctly, and you're resting, recovering, you should minimise injuries. But just so you're aware, common injuries are muscle strain, where you're overstretching the muscle or it's torn. So this often comes from lifting too heavy or going beyond the range of motion that your limb is comfortable with, or suddenly moving with too much force. Joint injuries like sprains of the ligaments and the joints can occur fairly easily, and often come again from underdeveloped muscles, or where you've twisted, you put yourself in a position where you've kind of pulled something by being, if you're carrying weight, by not being sure-footed, tripping over something, things like that. Back injuries, again, are fairly common, and you'll find, especially with things like leg presses and deadlifts, that if you don't get your form correct, they can be quite common and can be mild. If you're lifting really, really heavy, you can, and people do, herniate or have a herniated disc where their disc pops out. Don't worry about that. That is like way down the line when you're lifting 2 times your body weight. And these are people who are, really hardcore. That is not something that is going to happen lifting weights at this point for you. And then tendonitis, which is just overuse of the muscles. So this can lead to inflammation. You find it a lot in shoulders, elbows, and knees. Shoulders, often from the fact that you forget that you're using your shoulders. So if you're doing a bench press, if you haven't got the position right, and even if you have got the position right, and you're using a weight that is heavier than your chest can actually cope with, you will end up using other muscles to compensate for your lack of strength. And what happens is you then tire those muscles out. Because you don't realize that that is what you've been working, you then go and do a shoulder press, and your muscles are already exhausted, and so you can overuse them. So again, it's just being aware of the movements, what muscles are being used, and how often, and making sure that you're resting. Prevention, we've kind of covered a lot of this. Warm up, cool down, essential. Watch, learn, adapt constantly. Always think about your form. Try and develop that mind-muscle connection where you're saying, yeah, I really understand what is happening, every muscle that's contracting, everything that I need to engage in order to do this move, I am thinking about. If you ever experience discomfort, then stop the move. Now, that is not to say that you are not pushing through a barrier. It is uncomfortable sometimes to lift weights, especially heavier weights. It is uncomfortable to do certain movements because they tire your brain out as much as your muscles, because it's a scary thing. If you're doing a leg press and you're starting to push the weight significantly, or you're doing a deadlift, your brain will send signals to say, whoa, this is too much. That is not the same as discomfort in your body. So again, developing that mind-muscle connection where you say, yes, I understand, my muscle is not happy, I need to stop. Always progress gradually. Rest and recovery, we've got a whole section on that tomorrow. So making sure you're listening to the countdown when you have a rest between exercises, and you're also taking your rest days and you're not pushing yourself heavy on the rest days. And then finally, hydration and nutrition. Water, you need water in the gym. You need to constantly hydrate, and you also need to make sure that you have protein and carbs and fats in your meal at appropriate levels to repair and recover your body so that it is ready. If you have no carbs in your body, you will not have energy in your muscles and you will not be able to lift. If you're not eating enough protein, you will not have the amino acids in your body to repair all the damage that you're doing to your muscles and to build new muscles. So it's essential. And if you don't have the fats, then you won't have the vitamins being absorbed in your diet, which will lead to deficiencies and blah, blah, blah. You have to have good diet when you're working out. Okay, so a lot of information. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm sorry, it's a long one. Don't worry, you don't need to know it all. It will start to sink in slowly as you do more and more exercises. If you need to watch it again, please feel free. If you need to pause anything, skip back, go through it. That's fine. It's always here for reference. But thank you very much. There we go.